imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is March 14th, 2014. Tonight's edition, I am going to be playing my latest interview with Charlotte Thomson Iserbyt. We cover a lot of things tonight, including the dumbing down of America, Common Core, the Declaration of Interdependence, the entire dumbing down of society, the agenda, which includes a new form of government, i.e. a one-world government, who's behind it, her new DVD box set, Agenda 21, and so much more. So make sure you stay tuned in for the full 2 hours tonight and do not go anywhere. I promise you this will be a very powerful broadcast. Make sure you have a notepad and a pen so you can take notes here and there, so you can go do further research later on after the broadcast. And the archive will be available on federaljack.com completely uninterrupted. So, without further ado, let me get to my latest interview with Charlotte Thomson Iserbyt. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
So here we go again down the rabbit hole.
I love having you on. As I've told you before, you're one of my favorite guests, but you're one of my favorite people on this little blue marble that we all hang out on.
Oh, thank you. Well, you're one of my favorite radio show guys, probably right in the top, huh? There's so much to talk about.
One thing I wanted to reiterate was the dangers of Common Core. Especially since that is very prominent in the news as of late.
It's just Marxism, that's all, but we'll go into it. I mean, it may sound innocent, it sounds like we're getting nice standards, academic standards, but the Common Core itself is not standards. It's a framework, right? A certain type of person they're looking for.
Yeah, they want a multi-individual.
Right, and the curriculum is built around that, and whether it's English or whatever they're going to be using. Whether parents think that they're getting, doing Jane Eyre or whatever, Shakespeare, they're going to use that to implement the worldview that they want for that child to get. And so they really don't know. It could be math. It could be any program, curriculum that sounds perfectly normal is going to be used basically to change the child's worldview. And also for workforce training, it'll be applied learning too. So, yeah, we can talk about Common Core. Of course, we've had a Common Core ever since 1965, but they call it different names. It's amazing how they really dare give the same thing, 8 or 10 different labels through the years, but they know that through gradualism, nobody's going to know. People would consider that this is the final one, but it's not. according to what I'm finding out from the Catholic schools are in even worse trouble. They're getting the public school Common Core, but with the whipped cream is with Lee Shulman of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, who was responsible for the catastrophe in Chicago with the Mastery Learning way back in the late 60s. He's running it. He's working with the Catholics. So there's a lot to talk about. Common Core is not the key issue either. I mean, we've had it for so long, and the technology and all that goes with it is what is going to make it so dangerous. And the individual education plans, that's going to make it very, very dangerous because a computer, is a brainwashing machine. That's what is so, and the computer, the assessment possibilities, the data collection. We have to get into all of that. Who's getting the data? That's the scariest thing of all. The data collection on the assessment from the Common Core goes directly to industry, private industry. They've completely trashed the federal privacy rules for students. They trashed it. So the corporations are getting all the information on individual students, what they believe in, what they don't believe in, where they're weak, what this, that, and all, as far as being a good global Soviet man. And then they design software to remediate. And then they have the nerve to sell it back to the school districts. Sell it back. They got it free in the first place. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that giving out this very confidential private information, not just our children, but parents and all. Very serious. The use of personal information from the children in the public schools of America right now that is coming out of the assessment and is being turned over to the private corporations. And then they do their remediation, remediation software, and then it goes back to the individual student, and they just keep recycling and recycling. This is just the beginning of the assessment is going to go on out there 10, 20, 30 years because it keeps changing. As the children change, as they get what they want as human beings in the schools, and big charter schools mostly. They'll get rid of the public schools. Going to be trashed, because they have elected boards. The Common Core will not be recognizable in 5 years. They will have changed the type of individual they're looking for. Not changed it, basically, but they will be closer to what they need. These are the gaps. This is what we need now. You understand what I'm trying to say? I'd like to talk a little bit about that today. I think that your listeners and people out there, really good Americans, they've got to realize that things are really bad, but they, in quotes, are, they're behind schedule. They really are. They thought they were going to get us a lot earlier than now. This is important for people to know that whatever fighting they've been doing out there, and there are a lot of your listeners who have been activists and all, they get very discouraged, and they think that they're not making any impact, but in many cases, not all, but many cases they are, but you don't read about it because the media doesn't want anybody to know that there's any controversy whatsoever, whether you win it or not, right? Education really is the sacred cow. And I was talking to someone about that the other day, talking about media. They're never going to cover anything to do with education, and they never have. But I want to finish talking to your listeners a little bit about we can go back to that. That's an important point. I'd like to talk about later the fact that education is a sacred cow, no matter what party's in. But your listeners they've got to realize that I believe the target date for the Trotskyites, the communists, the socialists, the elitists, the corporate fascists, the corporations, and all the whole crowd. I don't want to leave anybody out. But their target date, I think, was probably the latest was 1990. I think they believed they would be able to take us down between 1976, the Declaration of Interdependence. That was the 200th year of our independence, right? 1976 and 1990. I mean, that's just Charlotte's viewpoint. But the reason I feel that is that in 1976, the Declaration of Interdependence was signed in Philadelphia by 126 United States members of the House of Representatives. They signed this document drafted by leftist, socialist, Espen Institute, whatever you want to call them, Henry Steele Commager, educator, in quotes, calling for world government of the United States, it's our Declaration of Interdependence, which is putting us under world government. It's all spelled out in there. I don't have it in front of me, but I think people can probably find it on the internet. They just type in Declaration of Interdependence and Commager, Commager. And that's a long time ago. It's 25, 35, 38 years ago. Boy, I've been around a long time. And we all fought that. And the NEA at the top, National Education Association, because most people would not know this, that the union, the National Education Association, at the top, this is not teachers, no, is in bed with David Rockefeller and all the corporations at the top. And we know that because we got a hold of a very important paper of the NEA's called NEA's Cardinal Principles. I think it was written in 1972, and it gave the whole plan for globalism in the education in the schools and the future and all the curriculum and all this and that. But the important thing was that at the back it had the pre-planning committee for the Cardinal Principles project. And at the top, the number one was David Rockefeller. And I must say, I was pretty surprised when we found that. And we weren't meant to find it. In fact, it was a very poor copy. It was one of those copies like, the ditto sheets. I don't know if you remember that in school, way back when. That's all we had, the purple ink. And the copy was the purple ink copy. But pretty clear. We were able to read it all. And it was about 50 pages. And we called the National Education Association, headquarters in Washington, and asked if we could get a copy of that. And they said that there never had been such a project, and they didn't have it. And we had the date and everything, that it had been published in NEA Today. And we called NEA Today. We called them, shortly thereafter. And they said they didn't know what we were talking about. So anyway, that shows that it was something that they didn't want out. And I think for good reason, mainly that one at the end showing who the National Education Association was in bed with at the top, right? The teachers, very few people know this in education. They just don't know. I think sometimes they wonder, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we getting rid of academics and the teachers? They're so busy with their 8 or 10 or 12 hour a day and correcting papers and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of them are still good teachers. They're not going to have that anymore because they're all computers, but they just haven't had time to do the digging that we've done outside the system. So that's an interesting little tidbit for people. Go on the internet. All of your listeners should go on the internet and Google a Declaration of Interdependence, and drafted by Henry Steele Commager. And that was a very important event. As I said before, that declaration was signed, believe it or not, by 125 or 126 members of the United States House of Representatives. So that means that at that time, how many members of the House do we have? How many? 435 or something, is it? So that's a good, almost 1/3 of the House at that time. Whether they were just stupid or dumb or communist or what, I don't know, but they did sign it to give away our Constitution, basically, right? At that time, really, they felt they had it in the bag. We had all these agreements with the Soviet Union. We had the SALT treaties and the strategic arms limitation stuff, everything going on then really led towards their feeling that perhaps they could bring us down earlier. I've seen other documents, real authentic government documents, referring to the phony fall of the Soviet Union. They didn't say that. That's my words for it. But where papers were written, government papers like a White House conference on the economy in the year 2000. I got a hold of that. It was written in the 70s. And it was a report, and it said that how on earth did it know in the 70s that the wall was going to come down? But it appeared that they did know, because they said in the 90s, the communist and democratic countries all would be working together. So how would they know that then, unless it was all being planned? Well, we do know from Soviet defectors that the fall was phony, totally phony. They had to have the fall in order to get rid of the big bad Soviet Union, the enemy, right? Get rid of that big bad wolf. And then we have to have a new enemy. So then we have 9/11, and we have to, Muslims, and, I keep having an enemy. They keep moving forward until they get us, huh? Boom. But say I'm wrong on the date. I would say the outside date there would have been the year 2000. I think they certainly planned on getting it between 1976 and 2000, perhaps earlier. And what I think that the work that Americans have done out there, they don't even know they've been successful. We've slowed them down enormously. For instance, take the North American Union. This is a good example that your listeners can relate to. Remember back 5 years ago, or when was it? We had this big uprising in the United States. Americans really aggravated over what they were hearing from good people like Jerome Corsi, Lou Dobbs, who was working at CNN at the time. He's no longer there, but we had a lot of great Americans fighting the North American Union, and people writing articles and good stuff. And for some reason, the media goofed on that particular one. They allowed that to get started. And, once that ball gets going, they couldn't stop it. And we were all, it was really, we were having a great time with that subject, and we were highly successful. And the reason I know that, and your listeners know that, I'm going to ask you a question. Have you heard anything about the North American Union? I'm not saying that they're not doing plenty with it, but I'm saying, have you heard anything in the papers? No. All of a sudden, they realize, oops, a lot of opposition out there. We better go underground, which is what they did. And so you don't hear about it. That doesn't mean you should give up on it or be anything like that. It just means that you were highly successful 5 years ago in making your views known about you don't want the North American Union because, as I always like to use Gorbachev's quote, the former president of the Soviet Union in the year 2001 in London, where he referred to the European Union as the New European Soviet. I always ask Americans, I don't tell them, I just say, look, what does that mean that the North American Union, which is modeled on the European Union? What is the North American Union? If Gorbachev refers to the European Union as being the New European Soviet. So that's very serious business. The North American Union is the North American Soviet, which is regionalism, which is communism, and Americans. And it's great that we did what we did. So you see what I'm talking about, Popeye?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if you and the people that came before, people like me and all these other great activists and speakers and radio show hosts and researchers that are out now today, I was born in the 70s. So if it weren't for you guys, I probably would have grown up in a total tyranny. I wouldn't even know the freedom that I know and that I enjoy, and that gives me that urge to fight. You know what I mean? I would never have known that.
Well, yes, and it's just I have a little interesting story on that one. About 20 years ago, probably, boy, time flies, something awful happened. I don't know whether it was when we gave the Panama Canal away or something like that. And I'd been working hard to, save the Panama Canal or whatever it was, and I just remember sitting in this beat-up old leather chair in our other house in Bath, Maine, and I just burst out crying. And I don't do that very often. I think it's the only time I ever have done that as far as politics were concerned. And I thought, it's just not worth it. I mean, what? You keep working, and that these people, these traitors, I mean, how do we stop them? I was just in tears. And then all of a sudden I thought, because I was getting ready to quit, and I thought, I can't really quit because it was an interesting concept that came in my head. It was sort of every day, even if we don't win this battle, every day that we postpone it is a day of freedom for a child being born today. And I started thinking about that. I was trying to get myself off the hook, having to work on this stuff anymore. And I started to think about it, and I thought, no, we can't stop. We can't stop. We just keep fighting and fighting and fighting and postponing the day. Well, we can't. We're not guaranteed. Nobody ever guaranteed victory, huh? But we keep postponing it. And that was a very important point in my journey, because I really was just about to say, it's useless. It's useless. Because I was looking at it in terms of winning the war. I'm not saying that we might not someday, but I think the thing is we have to look at it in terms of postponing it. We've got to convince people that there is a difference between freedom and dictatorship. And that's where we're running into trouble, because Americans do not understand what it's like to live under a tyrannical, totalitarian form of government. They just don't have the faintest idea.
Well, that's the other side of the coin, right? That's the other, I guess it's a double-edged sword, our grand experiment, because like Jefferson said, freedom is only a generation away from tyranny. And they've done that. They've literally dumbed people down into thinking tyranny is okay. And you tried warning us years ago, and back when you first started out, people thought you were crazy and they didn't want to listen, Charlotte. But you were 110% right, dear. I mean, look, and you can see the way they're doing it. They're so sly about it, Charlotte. Like, the parents don't even realize it, because they, oh, my kid's doing homework, I'm busy working, and as long as my kid's doing his homework, I don't care. But they don't look at the homework. They don't read what the kid is actually taking home.
No, that's right. No, they don't, and they just are so trusting.
There's a picture that I was sent on Facebook a couple of days ago, and it's someone took it of their kid's homework, and it's a sheet, and it's on top it says possessive nouns, and then the directions say make each sentence less wordy by replacing the underlined words with possessive nouns, and then write the sentence on a line. So it goes down, and it's got 6 of them in this example, and I'll read the 6 of them to you. It starts off with 1, the job of a president is not easy. So then the kid wrote, the president's job is not easy. 2, the people of a nation do not always agree. So the kid wrote, the nation's people do not always agree. 3, the choices of the president affect everyone. The kid wrote, the president's choices affect everyone, which they're using the child. You can see what they're doing. They're teaching the kid how to use possessive nouns, but as they're doing it, what are they using? They're using governmental type examples, and they keep using the president as if he's like the Führer. You know what I mean?
God.
Right?
That's right.
Well, wait. The next 3, the last 3, are. This is where you can. Now it sounds kind of innocent, right? Now, this is where if you're paying attention, you'll see this as soon as you hear these. Number 4, he makes sure the laws of the country are fair. So the child. Right. So the child writes, he makes sure the country's laws are fair, as if. What? What? No, he doesn't. That's not what the president's job is.
What do we have a Congress for?
Right.
What do we have our elected officials for?
Well, why do
Dictator.
Exactly. Why do we have 3 branches of government? They're not even teaching that, right? So wait, it gets worse. Here comes number 5. The commands of government officials must be obeyed by all.
That's the worst.
So the child writes, the government's commands must be obeyed by all. Like, what?
Oh, wow.
This wasn't even, I mean, we had indoctrination when I was in school back in like the 70s and the 80s, but it wasn't like this.
Popeye, what you made me think of, I'm glad you mentioned that. I had an email from a teacher yesterday. She has her doctorate in education and everything, so she's not just, a new elementary school teacher, but she's one of us. And she's very concerned about what's happening in schools and what has happened to the past and all that. And she likes my book. And so she said, in the past we had arguments about things like evolution and all. And there was sort of a choice. Teachers could present several viewpoints. But she said, do you see where they're coming in with one viewpoint now, and there's no discussion of anything else? So she's seeing that. Whereas in the past we could argue and get mad because they were discussing evolution or one thing or the other, we're all apes, and parents would get mad at school board meetings and this and that. But she said, it's no longer debatable. A lot of these things that are scientific are no longer debatable. So it sort of goes along with what you're talking about.
Well, number 6 is even that the last one is, I mean, as if number 4 and 5 weren't telling about where they're headed with this, right? Number 6, the last one, is very telling. The wants of an individual are less important than the well-being of the nation. The child rights, the individual's wants are less important than the nation's well-being.
That's just awful. It's the collective.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
I have a friend in California. He's one of the leaders in fighting UN Agenda 21. He said that the city manager had a big argument with him over what they're putting in, UN Agenda 21 and all. City manager actually told him that the needs of the community are more important than the needs of the individual, the rights of the individual. The individual's rights come second, are not to be considered. It's the good of the group. That's out of Marin County, California.
There's a lot of people that think like that.
Americans do. They probably would say, when they hear me saying that, well, what's wrong with that? Huh? It's really true. Good point you make. Because if you don't think about it, which people don't think much anymore, you might not get to our conclusion, right? You might just think, oh, isn't that nice? We've all been made to think in this warm, fuzzy way, Everybody got to be happy. Everybody can be happy. We all got to get along. And so that's when we say that, we all means the rights of the group take precedence over the rights of the individual. It's not much fun when you're in a courtroom and that's the way they're going to operate, where you have no individual rights, which are guaranteed by the Constitution, So anyway. Are you telling me that a student brought that stuff home?
Yeah, the parent found that. That's actually the work. And you can see where the child had filled it in with pencil on the lines. And it's interesting what's underlined in the pit, like when you look at it I'll send you a picture of it. I'll email it to you. And when you see it, you'll see what's underlined. And like in the first one, the job of the president is what's underlined. And obviously, I get it that they're trying to point out certain things about replace the underlined words with possessive nouns. But what they're doing is yes, they're teaching a little bit of grammar, but this is more mind control than anything else.
You were talking to me earlier about Common Core,
and
that's a very good example of Common Core. How they're going to take like math or science or history or whatever, and they want a certain type of thinking. This young man who had that test, they want him to believe that the rights of the individual are not as important as those of the group. So they're going to have Common Core sets standards. It does not develop curriculum. It's not the curriculum. So the standard would be American youth should understand the importance of the group versus the individual. And so they would use math. They could have a problem related to some hungry man or someone in a courtroom who's, whatever. They, some sort of a situation that the children are supposed to use their math skills in regard to dividing up the pie or the whatever it is in favor of the group. Do you understand what I'm saying? A very good example of this is an educator from Brazil his work is all over the curriculum, the Common Core, et cetera, and has been for quite a long time. Common Core is not new. We were talking about it earlier. It's simply very refined now and very easy to implement because of the computer and the ability to assess the children's attitudes and values. We didn't have that before. We had just sampling of students in every single state with a national assessment. It was called national assessment. Hey, folks, what does that mean? National assessment, national curriculum. It's amazing how people can just let that slide off their tongue, the word national assessment, and then they tell you that Common Core is the first time we've had a national curriculum. No. We've had national assessment since 1970. Okay. So anyway, I'm talking about this Brazilian educator, and his name, he's a communist, his name is Paulo Freire, Freire. He wrote a book called, which is interesting in itself, the title, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So you can see right here, we're talking communism. This is in my big book, Deliberate Dumbing Down. If you look under his name, you'll see this in my book, this quote. It's the end of a New York Times article where it said that there were some conservative groups in the country that were opposed to Paulo Freire's pedagogy. And then it gives an example of how he would use in first grade to teach children how to count. They have little miniature grenades that they count with, right? They count grenades. Well, that's interesting. Why grenades? I mean, what is this? We're going to go up against the rich people across town. We're going to blow up their houses. Grenades. We have had this kind of education for a long time. I'm thinking about my book right now for people who can go look at this stuff, free download, right? If you look under Edith Kermit Roosevelt, that's the right spelling, a wonderful writer, woman. She was very important in the 70s, writing for various newspapers. And she had an article that I clipped and I kept and put in my book. And it was in regard to the Carnegie Corporation's new reading program for inner city kids. It had pictures of a house with a porch, and then it had a picture of a torch and torching the porch. Torch the porch. They had to fill in the little box. They had a picture of torch. You'd fill that in, T-O-R-C-H, and then the porch, P-O-R. Okay, now that is Common Core. Got it?
That's total brainwashing. It's like in the photo, there's certain things that are underlined. And of course, that's the idea that they're pushing to the child is, oh, this is what you need, for the homework assignment. This is the words that you need to twist around and move around. But if you understand what's going on and you take a step back and you look at it, you can see what they're doing. The things that they've underlined, like in the sixth question, it was pretty much the needs of the many. That idea in the sentence was underlined, outweigh the needs of the few, and then that part was underlined. And you realize what they're doing when you look at it. The things that are underlined is pretty much the propaganda that they're driving home into that child's brain. It's what they're programming them with. And that's what this is. This isn't education so your child understands better grammar by any means. This is to program them into a little Trotskyite.
Well, that's true, and it's not new. I think that it's more pervasive now and in more schools, but I think it has really been used, especially in the inner city schools, because they wanted to keep the blacks and the whites separate. They want divide and conquer. They've always, and they've experimented. I've talked about this many times on your program, how they experimented with the minorities. This has been going on for a long time. There are a lot of examples of this kind of thing in my book, and it really is Common Core. If you look at the National Assessment of Education Progress that all states have had to take, it's sampling. It's just, maybe a tenth of the number of students in the state. It's a sample. But they get an idea of how they're changing the students' values from year to year that way throughout the country. It's been a very effective sampling. It's the same as Common Core. Common Core, in fact, I haven't found anything yet in Common Core or I guess it's pretty subtle, that it's quite as bad as some of the things that I saw in the 70s and 80s in the curriculum. About 20 years ago, I think it's in my book, there was a conference of the Association for Educational Research, AERA, I think, down in New Orleans. It was for English teachers, a big conference of English teachers. And they were talking about using literature to change the students' values. And several teachers just put their hands up. And they said, what are you talking about? We didn't go through our training in English literature and becoming English teachers to change the students' values. So there have been teachers all along, and there still are. And you can imagine how angry they are right now. I mean, they're just disgusted. They see the public school system, bad as it is, being purposely destroyed by requiring adequate yearly progress. Even the very good schools in wealthy areas are having to measure up to a level that is ridiculously even high for them, right? Because they want to be able to close them. Now we're moving on to another subject, but they've got to be able to close all of the public schools and put in the charter schools with the unelected boards, because even though a lot of school board members don't really recognize how important their jobs are and aren't doing the right thing, they're smart enough to know that it's unlikely the majority of school board members would want to have the academic system replaced by workforce training. And they might not vote for that. So they have to get rid of the school boards, elected boards. That's why the charter schools are coming in. They're closing down. Schools are being closed down. These corporations that have no educators involved in anything they're doing, they don't know anything about education, but they don't have to. Because if you're going to train someone for the workforce, they don't have to know Shakespeare and, the history of Eastern Europe or whatever, Asia. No, they're doing it all over the place, especially in inner cities, right? They're taking over whole districts. You know that. You've done it in Florida. Companies, corporations, charter schools have no elected boards. By the way, folks, this is all Jeb Bush's program, right? You know that. I don't have to tell him that. Your ex-governor, we really dislike him here in Maine because he came in here and was very responsible for getting our governor to buy into everything that you all bought into in Florida regarding school choice and charter schools. Just disgusting, our so-called conservative governor. So that's the wave of the future. Now, people could say, well, brainwashing and the values and attitudes and all this stuff, what does that have to do with school to work? Well, or total quality management? I mean, it has plenty. Because the whole workforce training agenda is total quality management, and total quality management is socialism. And it is that, as a worker, you keep your mouth shut. TQM is individual education plans. It really is very much like outcomes-based education. In fact, I've got papers on that where, some of the founders of the outcome-based education movement and mastery learning, Skinner and all that, in the inner city schools, they talk about, gee whiz, do we really want to get in bed with the corporations? This sounds like TQM, huh? And it is. The whole education hierarchy, the whole structure, I've talked about this before on your program, in the charter schools is going to be changed so that your children will have no competition. It's a Soviet polytechnical system, which is workforce training for the good of the global elite. That's exactly what it is. And your children will be graduating at either 14 or 21. Now, that should tell you something. I mean, how can you graduate at 14 unless you're a genius? And, can you imagine having any geniuses in the American public school system right now? No, it is that children will have an individual education plan, and some will be brighter than others. And it shows how dumbed down the system will be if you can have an average student, or maybe above average perhaps, graduating at 14. That's so that he can go on to further training, he or she, in whatever job the partnership, the corporate fascist public-private partnership has determined your child is going to have the rest of his life, right, or for as long as they need him. The other one, getting out at 21, he's slow. She is slow. And but they're going to make sure that child is exactly what they want, just like making a car. And in that regard, this particular program, which is called the Reinventing Schools Coalition, you can Google that, your listeners, RISC, Reinventing School Coalition. The school that did the first pilot of it was in Alaska, and it was written up in the Washington Post by David Broder about 12 years ago. The pilot for this school, RISC, which is being replicated all over the country, especially in inner city schools. And it calls for getting rid of grades A, B, C, D, which, A, B, C, D, grades kindergarten through 12th grade, implementing individual education plans, IEPs, like we've always had for special ed, because workforce training needs that, obviously. If you're going to be trained for a specific job, you have to have your own little plan. Basic, low-level, dumbed-down academics, like how many gallons of Clorox you need to clean a gym. That would be for the young man or girl who graduated at 21. That's the math that he would get. Now, the one who got out at 12 probably might have something more complicated. The interesting thing here that Broder said was that that particular school received the Malcolm Baldrige Total Quality Management Award. Now, that tells you that this new structure of education, no grades, no competition, no nothing, is the corporate model for education, right? Your child is being educated, being put together like a car.
I often equate the modern schools to factories with children when I talk about this on air.
That's right. It's very sad. A lot of children, myself included, I mean, how many of us really have ever been sure of what we wanted to do with our lives? I don't know. I myself am not too sure. I got off on this bent, about 40 years ago or something, and never got off because it did seem to be pretty important. The corporations and the schools, they assess your child to be determining what your child is going to do the rest of his life, or until, something changes and they need him for something else, they'll be retrained. That's absolutely insane. At that early age, now I know in Europe, they've done it for years. In ninth grade, it's split out, and either you're going to go for higher education or some form of vocational, which could be a very interesting life. I mean, it could be in landscaping or something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a very low-level job, but there's a division there in Europe. My husband, he was put into the intellectual higher education track. He's very smart, but he really would have been better off, believe it or not, if they put him on a music track or art. That's where his talents lay. But anyway, he could speak, 5 languages and Greek and Latin and all that, and very bright, but he really didn't want to go in the field of law and whatever, the professions. He didn't want it. But they did it because of his grades. They put him there, and his brother, who was not as intellectually gifted, went into landscaping, into the other track. But prior to ninth grade in Europe, they had a superb K through 8. They really got a lot under their belts in the early years, so it was a very good system of education. But then on the other hand, it did not educate as well as we did in our country up until 1965, all children. There were a lot of gaps in Europe, whereas in the United States, we made a pretty good effort, even though everybody would pick on what happened, with the minorities. I think that the minorities now, if they're going to be honest about the whole thing, and some of them are, they'll tell you that they got a far better education before the civil rights movement. Interesting, But it would be difficult for anybody not to have gotten a better education than what we have now. We've just gone backwards, because the more we spent, the lower the test scores. And if that's not deliberate, I don't know what the definition of deliberate is.
The first time I interviewed you, you told me about Kenny Hignight's test.
Kenny's test, yeah.
And we downloaded it, and we took it. We were on air one night, and there was a bunch of us who were on a roundtable broadcast, and we started asking the questions and talking about the test.
Great. We
could only answer maybe 20% of those questions. Couldn't tell you half of the stuff. I'm in my 30s at the time that we're doing this, and this test was a kid doing this, and he obviously knew all the answers. You could see it was all filled in.
I know, I love it. 8th grade. It was an 8th grade test. I mean, I did contact him finally. Did I tell you? What happened is after I talked about it for the first time on Alex Jones, the next day I had a phone call from a guy who I had been looking for Kenny Hignight for about 5 years. I couldn't find him anywhere. I looked everywhere. I went on the internet. I just couldn't. I found Hignights, but never found Kenny Hignight because I wanted to tell him that I was using his test. And so I get this call, and this guy said, "You know what?" He said, "I was listening to you on Alex Jones." He said, "I have my office is in my house, and I was out in the shed working on something. I don't know what he was, but he said, I heard you talking about Kenny Hignight." And he said, he's a good friend of mine. And I said, "Oh, you're kidding." I said, "I've been looking all over for him." And he said, "Well, He said, he's a wonderful guy. He said he's probably the best plumber in Northern California. And I thought, see, I mean, look at that. Here he was doing that well on that test, and he ends up being a plumber. That's great, you know, and he's probably making a fortune. But here you have somebody in the plumbing field who has more knowledge than a professor out of Harvard because he went to school, public school, back in 1956 in Central California. And we had a really good conversation. And then I finally did talk to Kenny. He said, you know, a lot of people would think that we had a really, you know, that it was sort of an old maidey type teacher that we had who was so fussy about everything. And you know, she gave me a hard time. You know, I got, 99, A plus 99. I didn't get 100. And he said, you should have seen that chick. And I said, what? He said, oh, yeah, she was cute. She was 24 years old, and she was the biggest stickler for having everything just so. And if you didn't get your homework in on time, you got an F. And she was only 24 years old, and she was very good looking. He said, I'll never forget her. And, you know, really, when you look back, at least when I look back, because I'm older, but that wasn't that long ago. You know, that was just before. It was 1956, I think, that test. It was 9 years before we lost it. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act under Lyndon Johnson in 1965 is what killed academic education. That was when they decided everything was going to be performance-based. That's outcomes, right? Outcomes-based, Ed, Skinner, Pavlov. Not what you know in your head. What you can do, how you can perform. That's workforce training. They knew exactly what they were planning, what they were doing. And as I've said before on your show, that wasn't the beginning of the planning. That was when they put it in. But they've been planning it since 1934. And that was the Carnegie Corporation's little book that I have, the Conclusions and Recommendations for the Social Studies. And that little book is at my son's website. You know, type in, I think, the report on the commission or conclusions. Anyway, that report is right there. It's a little book, and luckily I got a hold of that, and there aren't any copies around. And it says right in there, I've read it, I think, on your show before, it calls for using the schools to change America's economic system to a planned socialist economy. It talks about our freedoms. We're losing our right to property when we lose our free economic system and all. They'll be implementing a they don't say totalitarian, they don't even say socialist, but planned economy, okay? And so that means that we'll be our land will be taken from us in certain instances, and we won't be happy about that. So it's a total plan for what they're putting in now. And it says it would be done through the schools. And the title of it is Conclusions and Recommendations for the Social Studies. So they were going to do this through the schools, through social studies. So what they had to do, they had to change the label from history, I call it, to socialism studies. And that's what they did. They changed our history so our young people didn't understand, you know, the basic documents underlying our form of government and economic system. That's what they did. And they did it through, as I said it right in the title, Conclusions and Recommendations for the Social Studies. It's a fascinating little book. Have you looked at it, Popeye?
Yes, I have scanned over it. I haven't gotten a chance to, in depth, you know, tear it apart and just focus directly on that. But even in just scanning it over, it's one of those golden nuggets of information. It's one of those keys that unlocks the puzzle. It helps you understand what's going on.
Oh, yeah. So you don't think you're crazy?
That's why I love your son's site. Sam's site is just awesome. Your son's site, and ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, her son's site, AmericanDeception.com, you have to go there. It's worth getting a subscription. It's not expensive at all. Do it. You can download the entire content of the site, and I urge you to do so. So does Charlotte and her son. He has spent, a ton of time on it. I want to give him a big shout-out for that because that is just a vast treasure trove of information.
Oh, it really is, and I'm very proud of him too for doing it. And most of it, like 90% of it, is free. 10% is donor access only. That's the only way he can, just even keep it going. It's cost a lot of money, that website, to spin out of his own pocket. And but then there's some you'll see donor access only. And but I would recommend you just go on in and get yourself for $50 for 2 years. You can download the whole thing. The Reese Committee report, the whole 3,000 pages of the congressional investigation of the tax-exempt foundations is up there. That's 3,000 pages, and I had to pay for that. But the interesting thing on that is that that's the investigation of the tax-exempt foundations during which the research director, Norman Dodd, was told by the president of the Ford Foundation during the investigation that the foundations got their instructions from the White House. At that time, it was Dwight Eisenhower. And but it happened prior to that, too, under Roosevelt and everybody. And the instructions were that they should use their money to change America so it could be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. What I just said to you right then is not in the 3,000 pages because the reason for this, Norman Dodd himself, the research director, told me this, but we know it's true. But the reason it is not in the record is because that meeting that Dodd had with Gaither, the president of the Ford Foundation, in New York City, was off the record. And Gaither said that he would only, which is really amazing that they could dictate the terms of it, right? He would only participate in the meeting with Dodd if it was off the record. So you just have to believe what Norman Dodd said. But that the foundations, after that investigation, was abruptly shut down by both Republicans and Democrats. They didn't want that information out, what the tax-exempt foundations have been up to, especially in education. Extraordinary stuff in there on education. They didn't want the American people to even know that the investigation had ever happened. So they went around to all the libraries where you can get congressional documents at your library. You used to be able to. And they bought up all the copies. And there were none left in the country except this one that I managed to get. Now, the person I bought it from was a very good friend of Norman Dodd's, and he was offered about 25 years ago any amount of money for that one copy. The foundation, one of the minions from the foundation, offered him that because they wanted it. And he turned them down. And then about, 6 years ago, my friend came to me and he said, Charlotte, would you like to buy it? And I did. I got it for really nothing, $3,000, That's, $1 a page. And so what you have there is worth, I don't know, it's worth hundreds of yearly memberships to my son's website. Just that one document. If we want to save this country, we're going to have to do our homework. Because how can you fight a war if you don't have any ammunition? I mean, if your listeners and all that, they're good. Your listeners, I'm not getting after them, but I'm talking about Americans in general. How that they can't go out there and fight this wretched corporate fascist socialism form of government they're about to impose on us unless you have ammunition. And you've got to get the documents, and you've got to be able to show your friends and explain it and know what happened. You've got to know your history. Because how can you, what are you doing, go out in the front lines without a gun? It's crazy. That's why Popeye, we did this project, that I was talking to you about earlier. This is what we call the toolkit for Americans to at least fight the war and have the ammunition. The 8-disc project exposing the global road to ruin through education. All these wonderful discs, our presentations by 15 of the nation's finest education and political researchers and writers and activists over a period of 50 years. Some of these people are still alive. We also have one CD is just written documents, written stuff. Out of 9, one is written, about 260 pages of written materials, old articles, documents, etc., that are terribly important that you have never seen the light of day. And then the other 7 discs are presentations by Americans from across the country. We've got 15 of them. 4 are public school teachers. 11 are with Samuel Blumenfeld, the expert on reading, his wonderful program, Alpha Phonics, for anybody in the audience there. Just if you want to teach your child to read, and even if they're in the public school, go get Alpha Phonics. Just type that into Google, and you can teach your child to read. And we gave Sam, there's a trailer to this project, Exposing the Global Road to Ruin Through Education, which will be launched in early December, and you can buy it. Your listeners can buy that. It's going to be $40. It will be for sale at Amazon. I hope you'll go there. I hope you'll get it. It's really very valuable, very good price. But there's a trailer. If you want to know what you're going to be buying, there is a trailer which deals with only the first conference we had a year ago this past August. We had a conference in August 2012 in Maine and a conference in August 2013 in Georgia. And these 2 conferences, we brought in the Americans that we considered to be the most knowledgeable. None of them are affiliated with any conservative or liberal group, basically. We're all independent researchers who've been watching this for years, what's happening, and written on our own, and we are very, very disturbed by the fact that both parties, basically, their agenda has been the same. And that is why it's been very difficult for your activists out there, your listeners, etc., to accomplish anything. I don't have to go into great detail on that. So we're not affiliated. I mean, I suppose some are Republicans and Democrats and all, but we're all individualists. If we see something that's wrong and it happens to be in our own party, we'll speak out. That's wrong. And if Obama happened to do something that was good, which would be sort of a miracle, but if he did, I would say, okay, good. So we're not party people, and the presentations are extraordinary. There's one in particular that exposes the neoconservative Trotskyites, 1 hour of documented expose of all the different groups and the names of the people who have been involved in implementing the very thing they told the little old ladies in tennis shoes out there who were sending them checks, that they're involved in exactly what they told these people they were fighting, like the UN. They've all been. Most neoconservative these groups are supportive of the United Nations, and yet they will tell you they're not. The major one, the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., drafted the North American Free Trade Agreement. Need I say more? And they're not alone. They're the big elephant in the room, and they have an affiliate in every state with different names. You would not be able to identify them with Heritage in Washington, D.C., because it has a different name. They all have different names in different states for the Heritage affiliate. So what we've been fighting is the right and the left, not knowing that the right is in bed with the left, and wondering why don't we ever get anywhere? Well, how can you when both sides are the same? So this whole project, that's just one disc, one presentation is by a marvelous researcher in Tennessee who's been following the phony right for about 40 years. Complete documented. Everything's documented. And it's sad to look at. It's sad to see. Yeah, for myself, because it took me a long time. I had to Charlotte had to be burned. How many times, Popeye? Well, finally, the last burning was, I guess, when I was in the Department of Education, and Ronald Reagan, gave us the planned economy in the Soviet system. Thank you. Under the big title of A Nation at Risk. Remember that? Well, you were too young to know that, but that's what we had the big report out of my office. A Nation at Risk. And this was meant to put back all the basic academics and everything parents were screaming about in the early 80s. Well, that did just the opposite. What it did was it gave us computers. It gave us the rotten, phony school choice agenda. It gave us Pavlov and Skinner. It gave us public-private partnerships. That was when President Reagan set up the White House initiative on private sector initiatives. And I was the liaison with the White House on that. And I thought what was a rather important question. I had always thought that public-private partnerships were corporate fascist. But the White House informed me that they didn't think anybody had looked at it that way, and that was the end of my being liaison with the White House. My boss took me off that. So that we can thank Ronald Reagan for giving us that corporate fascist system which was necessary for school to work, and charter schools with unelected boards. So we can thank him for that. We can thank him for the agreement with Gorbachev to merge the two education systems. We can thank him way back when he was governor of California for regionalism. Anyway, that project is loaded, and it's just, I've put a lot of time and work into it. I hope your listeners will. Now, the job is up to them now. We've done our work. We've got our toolkit for you there. And if you go to just Google, it's YouTube, Exposing the Global Road to Ruin Through Education. And now your job out there in the hinterland is to buy that project. It's $40. You can do anything you want with it. The written documents, you can click on them and download them and print them and use them separately. The video presentations, you'll be able to do the same thing. Say you like the one I just talked about the Trotskyites and exposing them and all. You can download separately each presentation and use it. So it's up to you now. We turn it over to the American people, this project. It's your toolkit to take your country back. And we do say, which is a remarkable recommendation, I find. I can't imagine the words coming out of my mouth, but we are having to recommend holding on to the American public school system because it's the only entity, as bad as it is, and I wrote a big book about how bad it is, it's the only entity that is tax-supported, that has elected officials running it. The other options that they're talking about with these fancy school choice options. We've always had school choice in the United States. That means either you can go to the public school, or you can pay and put your child in a private school, or you can homeschool. That's it. That's basically it. That's school choice. That's true school choice. The school choice options that are being given Americans now, they better start thinking. Take a look at those words. Look, they're tax-funded. So it's public education, isn't it? So that means that if you have tax-funded private education, you're going to have the public school curriculum and testing and no school board. Got it? So, let me ask you a question. What would you say there? Which do you prefer? Do you prefer the present public school system, which has K through 12, A, B, C, D, competitive? It still is. We still got that. It's wobbling along with an elected school board. And as bad as it is, and everybody wants to, talk about how bad it is, and I agree, it's pretty bad. You want that? You want to stick with that one? Or do you want what the corporations want, what Obama wants, what Arne Duncan wants, what the Heritage Foundation wants, and what the Council on Foreign Relations wants. You know what they want? They want to destroy the public school system. In fact, Lou Gerstner, the former chief of IBM, called on Obama to bring down all 16,000 school districts. By that, he doesn't mean brick and mortar. He means to destroy them and put charter schools in there with unelected boards so they can do anything they want. You have no recourse. You, parent, who think that you want your child in a charter school. It sounds better. Anything's better than the horrible public school system. Think twice. You're going to have the same curriculum, the same testing, and no elected officials to whom you can go if you don't like the curriculum. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's what they do in Soviet and fascist countries. They have no elected officials. They have little councils. So, not much of a choice, I agree. I'm not particularly happy with the way I have to come down in support of the public education system. But we're not supporting it the way it is. This is our little toolkit. It calls for not entirely getting rid of the U.S. Department of Education. We want to get rid of the damage it's doing right now, but we're going to keep a little office in Washington, and we're going to have some watchdogs sitting in there, 50 watchdogs, one from each state elected, who's going to make sure that they don't do anything, they don't outsource their assessment, all the other horrible things that, teacher training, all this stuff, that it isn't outsourced to Health and Human Services or wherever, or the corporations. We're going to have one office to watch and maintain, because we have to be able to go to Congress. And if we get rid of the department entirely, we won't have that connection with Congress for representation if we find something going wrong. We want to get rid of all the state departments of education and bring education back to the local level. Elected school boards, elected superintendent of schools, nothing but academics, reading, writing, arithmetic, ABCD, competition, back to pre-1965. Now, that's a big order, and, people could say, she's got to be crazy. There's no way that can ever do that. Well, okay, fine, but we're going to try. Because the option that I just told you about, the unelected boards, corporate fascism, Lou Gerstner calling on Obama to bring down all 16,000 school districts. How do you like that? When the ex-head of IBM could call on the President of the United States of America to destroy your public school system? That should really shock. That shocked me. I found that out. Everybody thinks I know so much. I don't. I was doing an interview with a gal in California who told me about that about 6 months ago. I did not know that. She said, Charlotte, did you know what Lou Gerstner just did? And I said, no. And she told me, and she said, but he also did it 5 years ago. So he called on Obama 5 years ago to do that. It was in the Wall Street Journal. And then again, this last July. School choice, that's what they want. They call it school choice. Sounds so good. They don't tell you that it's tax-supported without local school boards.
Which means it's school choice, but it's not your school choice. It's their school choice.
Absolutely. It's Soviet Polytech workforce training. That's what it is. Because the decision has been made, and they've told everybody, that we're going global, and we've got to be able to compete. Oh, well, you know something? I haven't seen any school-to-work projects so far that have been put in that are going to help us to compete, really. Sure, if we want to compete with the third world, we have the most extraordinary country. What are we doing? People came from all over the world, hundreds of thousands, millions, to this country to get away from the very system that both parties, Republican and Democrat, are putting in right now. They're putting in a planned economy. What do you think people came from the Soviet Union over to this country, or from all the other ism countries? Why did they come to the United States? For freedom. For freedom under the Bill of Rights, under the Constitution, for upward mobility, for being able to decide what you want to do. Not what the corporation in bed with the government's going to tell you have to do, as soon as you're in 6th grade or earlier. This is a lifelong system they've got planned for us, and we know that. This is lifelong learning out of UNESCO. And UNESCO, this United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, they've had this plan, ever since 1950, and it's lifelong. And it's the whole community. And it will be brainwashing for the whole community. And we have some really good documents, original documents in this project that show that is exactly what they planned. I have a document from 1968 in Chicago, inner city schools. It's one piece of paper. And it's the top guy is from Carnegie, Lee Shulman. He was the president of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching a good 30 years after this catastrophe that he oversaw in Chicago. He kept getting promoted. He's now helping the Catholic hierarchy with their Common Core. His name is Lee Shulman. Google him, okay? But this project, I'm talking about lifelong learning here, and community brainwashing. There's one, I had the original 175-page grant that was made to the Chicago inner city schools in 1968. It's on my son's website. Type in Chicago inner city schools. There's a piece of paper there that's very clear, and I show it on one of my presentations on this project we're talking about. And it says, just think in terms of take a piece of paper and divide it into 3 columns, 1, 2, 3, okay? And then you divide it 3 ways down, 1, 2, 3. And you have, over to the left, you have teachers, and then you have below teachers, students, and then you have community, and that first section. Then the second section is instruction for all 3 of them, right? Instruction. And then the third one, it says outcomes, desired characteristics for all 3. So you go in, it's so easy to read this thing. You go in as a teacher or a student or a member of the community, folks, lifelong, community education. All right. You go in with your values that you got in the home or the teachers got, all of us have. Americans used to have, sort of generally speaking, with the same values. But you go through the system, which is the middle column, it says instruction for all 3 levels, and then you come out, it says outcomes, desired characteristics. Well, who sets the desired characteristics? The UN. And the fact that they included the community in it shows you that it is not academic, I think, right? Because the community, usually you get out at 18 or go to college or something, and then you're sort of on your own. No. It's not academic, but it's brainwashing. And the whole plan, and we have a very important paper in that project by a great researcher, Ruth Feld, in regard to the community education movement in the United States. It started in Flint, Michigan. The Mott Foundation, way back in the 40s, and we have little diagrams of how we're all going to be like Rosa Corey talks about it in Behind the Green Mask. They're going to get us all off our land and into the city and to stack and pack, and we're going to have these little communities, and we'll all be under the umbrella, unelected, the umbrella of the unelected school superintendent. And all services, it sounds nice, doesn't it, will be provided by the unelected councils, lifelong. That means abortion clinic, workforce training, taking grandma to see the leaves in the autumn, health, you name it. Everything you could possibly think of will take place under this big umbrella. And we'll all be in this nice little community with being run by unelected councils. This is the plan. And I know there are people out there shaking their head. They're saying, well, I've heard her say a lot of things in the past, and, I thought she really made a lot of sense, but this one really is going off the charts. Well, think about it. Get the project. Costs you $40. You can get it from Amazon, Exposing the Global Road to Ruin to Education. And when you see the documents in there, you'll say, oh, gee whiz, look at that document from 1940. 1940, that document has exactly what she's talking about. The plan. Communism. That's the plan, and that's why they had to have the phony fall of the Soviet Union. So Americans would think that everything was just fine. So we can just focus on the Middle East and terrorism and everything else, which is worth focusing on. I'm not saying it's not, but see, we had to have a new enemy because the old enemy was the thing that we really have to be focusing on. We don't want people to focus on that. I know when I say things like this, I really feel badly about the audience. How about no religion? Forget it. Religion, unless we've got the Tibetan Buddhists or something running, the New Age cults running everything. Everybody's got to be happy, and comfortable, because that's the New Age philosophy. Don't ever question anything. Just go with the flow. Yeah, go with the flow, because it's going to be a lot easier when there's a hammer over your head. Wake up, America. We've been had by both parties, but we hope, we who did this project, we're hoping that it's just our effort, our toolkit for all of you out there. It's of no use whatsoever unless all of you in the audience gets on board and gets copies of it and gets it out and reproduces different segments of it and sends it to your elected officials and to your school board chairman and to your minister and to your businessmen who might be falling for this partnership with the government, which is going to put them out of business. We've just done what we knew we had to do. And, if people out there, your listeners probably will do something with it. But if the majority of American people don't, at least we can say we did our best. And you listeners, if you're going to involve yourself, can say you did your best. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. And we're all Americans. That's the other thing that's driving me crazy. They've got us all divided. And, just because I may not agree with some lifestyles, and I don't, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't feel that people with different lifestyles don't also have a right to the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. We're all Americans. And we've got to get over this business of them and us being divided, because they've been very successful. Divide and conquer. What makes us think that you who live, if you live in a rather lucrative or whatever lifestyle, what makes you feel that someone in the inner city doesn't have the same rights under the Constitution that you have? They do. They're identical. So we're all in this together. And we've got to stop fighting each other. If we want to fight, let's fight the phony right. Let's tell everybody that the phony conservatives are in bed with the corporations and with the globalists. Those are the people to be fighting. Those are the people that don't want us to have our freedom, that want to cut our population, that want to take our land. Let's fight the right people. Let's stop fighting one another.
The people they're divided, it's so easy to divide them because of the level of mind control and manipulation that's going on today. People are, from the time we're born, we're programmed to be looking at each other in a judgmental fashion and picking apart everyone's differences rather than looking at the ways that we're all similar.
Exactly. That book called Propaganda, isn't it? By Bernays. Sigmund son-in-law or something, or
his nephew.
Right?
Yeah, his nephew.
Yeah, I mean, the media has just been so instrumental, and I do, you know, you've got my Devil's Seven-Prong Fork. That's at newsfeed.com. You've got to recommend a lot of those articles, including Anita Hoag's I told you about. Be sure, you know, to recommend these articles. So Devil's Seven-Prong Fork explains how it could only be satanic, you know. They're so brilliant. How did they accomplish what they've accomplished so far in just 100 years, really? It's satanic. No brilliant. Einstein couldn't have dreamed it up, you know. And then I just sort of figured out it was through, you know, gradualism, fog in the cold water, semantic deception, using words familiar to us that mean something totally different to them. The dialectic, create the problem, people scream, then you impose a solution they never would have accepted, you know, otherwise. Media control, we're just talking about it. Endless money, the Federal Reserve, brainwashing in the public schools, and the method, the Pavlov method, stimulus response, and both parties the same at the top. That's a brilliant agenda. And, you know, if you were on the other side, you don't have to say, you know, you get A+. Unbelievable and hard for any human mind to devise because it's so diabolical. And that's how they did it to us. So we've got to undo it. We've got to undo the damage. You know, it's like David and Goliath. There's no question about that. That we can be successful. You know, what is it? They say 5%. What is it? I heard the other day it only takes 3% of a population that really goes after something in the right way to be successful. It's a very small percentage. You know, if you could get 2 million Americans, if you divide 2 million by 50, you know, if you look at it that way, it's doable. I mean, I mean, if we've got 10 people in this state who know what's going on, I'd be amazed. I mean, if we could get that many people in each state, of course, the big states would have more. You could do it.
Oh, without a doubt. This isn't something, their agenda isn't something that I see as set in stone. A lot of people think that, you know, when we talk about this stuff, they're like, well, you know, there's nothing we can do. What can we do? The force is so huge against us. That's just the thing. It's not. It just looks that way. It's an illusion of that. There's actually more people out there awake and aware than we realize. It's just it's that programming that we've gotten instilled into us,
right,
that we think we're little and we're by ourselves, and they do that to the children from the time that we're kids. I mean, I remember them doing it to me as a kid. They would program us that we were alone, we were nothing, you know, we were just, you know, we were all by ourselves. They would scare the crap out of you. I mean, now it's even worse.
You know, just in talking to you right now, I'd never thought of it like this before. In terms of, yeah, I mean, if you had that many people in each state, with the information to get it out, really gung-ho activists, we could turn it around. I'd never really thought of it in dividing the country up that way. You know, we've got 300 million people. How many would, 3% of 300 million? Maybe you'd have a far better situation than we do right now, where we're looking at it like we can't do anything, because we've never looked at it this way, Popeye. We've never looked at it from the standpoint of what percentage of our population do we need. And what I'm talking about when I mean what is the quality of that percentage. Now, the quality would be activists who have the documents, who have the research, who can go out and explain to their neighbors, et cetera, what's going on, and bypass the media. I mean, it really, it's a doable thing. And considering the alternative, it's like George Orwell said in 1984, the boot in your face. And he said, and that's forever. And then he repeated it, forever. And so we can't let that happen. And it hasn't happened yet. And I just hope that people will take advantage of our project, exposing the global road to ruin through education. And the reason we put global, because we want this to go around the world. I mean, I admit in one of my presentations, I apologize to the rest of the world for the role of the United States in changing education, not just in the United States, but we had change agents all over the world. From 1960 on, in Thailand, in Germany, all over, persuading the governments to get rid of their classical academic education. Did you know that? Yes, we did. Shame on us. We've been very instrumental in imposing this totalitarian system on not just our own people, the rest of the world, the United States. Shame on us. And, it doesn't mean the rest of the world. And we've got some pretty bad players out there like, China and Russia and all these other. But we funded the Bolshevik Revolution. Wall Street funded the first communist takeover in the world. We funded.
Rockefeller brags about it in his memoirs.
Yeah. So doesn't it make sense that we would be behind this destruction of the classical education system to impose the Soviet Polytech lifelong workforce training, which benefits it does benefit someone. It benefits the elite. And it even did in the Soviet Union. And it does in communist China or Korea or Cuba. The elite, they really do benefit from this. But you don't. The average human being on this planet won't. He's going to be controlled, through the computer. Every single thing he looks at, thinks about, whatever. You got to have every heartbeat in the computer. And that's the major reason for school choice, believe it or not. If you can get school choice in, you've got every heartbeat on the planet. And you're in control. I often say that. People do not understand that. School choice is the vehicle to get everybody. Boom. Under your thumb, because of the money. And most people go to school, right? So if you can get every homeschooler, every private school, every religious school, and every public school, which is what they're doing with charter schools, no school boards, no elected, under tax-funded, all those entities, you've got everybody, don't you? Even the little Zulus sitting in the grass in Kenya. You got them in the computer. And they got to have every single heartbeat in that computer in order to control us. Otherwise, it's like a chain. You can't have any, gaps in the links.
Where is this whole Global Road to Ruin box set going to be available for the listeners to
purchase? At Amazon. Easy enough for them to remember. Just go to Amazon. And if you buy multiple copies, you can always get it through me. That's deliberatedumbingdown.com. Say you want to buy 5 sets or something, and you don't want to go through that pain with Amazon, because it is sort of, they charge you for every one they charge $4, whatever. If you get 10 sets, they'll charge you $40, right? Instead of sending them all together or whatever, I don't know. But Amazon is great for 1 or 2 or whatever. You can try to do it multiple copies if you can, but that's the major place to go, Amazon. And if you have any questions or you want to buy more, go through my website, deliberatedumbingdown.com, and you'll see how to contact me. God bless all of you. And as I said, there's hope. There really is. I think they're late. I don't think they expected to get us earlier. They're not on time. They expected, the Declaration of Interdependence in 1976. I think that they could be 10 years off or 20. But the other thing, any call for a constitutional convention, no, never. Do not go along with that no matter what it calls for. Because the plans are there, and we know it. They've had this plan for years. The new Constitution is ready to go. I've even got a copy. I think Sam has it on the website. Maybe, I'm not sure. Rexford Tugwell drafted it in 1940-something. Brain trust for Roosevelt. The new Constitution is ready to go. And so all they need is a Constitutional Convention, and it's going to be something, balance the budget or protect the parents or something that sounds really good. Americans will jump on board and go for it. And I think there are only a few states left now for them to get on board for a Constitutional Convention. So if you hear anything about that in your community, go on the Internet, do all your homework, and stop it. That'll be, you see, that's the point right here. I think we still got 20 years maybe. However, if they can get a Constitutional Convention and we're going to end up losing our Constitution. That's what's going to happen. It will be opened up, and we'll lose it, and that's the plan. And if we lose the Constitution, then forget it. They can take your land. They can do anything they want with you. So right now, they are behind time, and it would take them probably 10, 20 years to get what they want. But if they get the Constitutional Convention, that's curtains for the United States and for our form of government and economy, free system. That's it. Do not fall for anything that says Constitutional Convention, Conference of the States, nothing. We're perfectly fine with the Constitution that we have. And those who want this are the enemy.
I couldn't agree more. I say this all the time because I've heard people say, well, maybe we should have a Constitutional Convention and we can add this or add this. And I'm like, no, because that's a bad idea. And they're like, why? I said, because that's what they want. That way they can go in and they can go, oh, you know what, the Second Amendment, we don't need these things antiquated. By freedom of speech, well, only except if you hurt someone's feelings. So got to add some punctuation and reword that a little bit. And, well, how about the Fourth Amendment? Oh, well, you don't need that. I mean, we don't use it anyway, so let's get rid of that.
Just keep fighting that, Popeye. I mean, please. We fought a war. We fought a war for representation, taxation without representation. We're giving that one away, too, with charter schools. That's taxation without representation. So we're going to give that one away. We're going to give the Constitution away. Come on, folks, wake up. Don't. Leave things alone. Just forget change. Oh, I hate that word. That word change just became such an irresponsible word. Nobody ever asks why. What for? Who's behind the change? I was trained to be a change agent, remember? Yeah, that was way back when they didn't really talk about change that much. Change agents, change. I was trained to identify the resistors in my community. That was, when I was on a local school board. A retired teacher called me and said she wanted to pay for me to go to that training because she agreed with what I was doing on the board, but she said, I don't think you really understand what's behind this whole thing. And I didn't until I went. And just remember that. People who are out there, that's like the Constitutional Convention. They're trained to con you into accepting these things. The Delphi technique, they're trained to con good Americans into thinking they have to have a Constitutional Convention. I was trained how to identify the resistors to sex ed, drug ed, all that. I couldn't believe that I was being trained in the United States of America to identify resistors, especially since I was a resistor. I was being trained to identify myself. I was a change agent. All these people are change agents. They don't like our form of government. They don't like you. Because anybody who listens to Popeye is probably independent. They don't want independent thinkers. They want sheep. Take him to slaughter.
I love when your passion comes out and you get fired up, Charlotte. Thank you so much for coming on and spending the last couple hours discussing this stuff. And again, I agree the listeners need to pay attention, but the listeners need to go to her website, get her book, get the updated book. But I also urge you, because I'm a book collector, get the big one, the old one. If she still has some left, she signs them. It's a collector's item. Do it. You'll be getting a piece of history from a legend herself. Do it. Get the abridged version, the new. Get both versions. She's even got a deal. I remember, Char, you had a deal going on with both versions, and you autographed the big one, right?
Yep, I do. They can have the new one free. The pack is $160 for the old one, the original, signed, and that includes the new one, signed, free, and I pay the shipping. Yeah. So if they're interested in that, they can go to my website for that, And then the project, please, folks, write this down, Exposing the Global Road to Ruin Through Education, and that is YouTube. Just type in YouTube and Exposing the Global Road to Ruin Through Education. And then you'll see there, and be sure to go all the way down in the ordering section, scroll all the way down to find out the price of the project and where you can send money to. But do go and look at the trailer, because the trailer is interesting in itself, okay?
For about $200, they could literally get a 2-year subscription to your son's site, both your books, and that 8-DVD box set.
That's right. I know. It's so true. And it's so easy. You go to the supermarket and you could spend $200 in 15 minutes. I know. Well, I hope people will take you seriously, Popeye. As I say, we can only do what we can do. And then it's up to the listeners. It's up to their friends. And it depends on how much they care about their children and the future of our country.
I agree. If people can spend over $1 billion on Grand Theft Auto, which was a video game, in about a week, they can spend $200 on your massive collection of. You would have everything, all of Charlotte's, her life's work of exposing all this stuff, documents you cannot get anywhere else, but her son's website. All of this stuff, the DVDs, everything, the books, for $200. People, do it. I mean, that's an investment, and you're actually helping to create a better world. Just do it,
and they'll feel good about it. You will. We always talk about how we have to talk about people who want to feel good about themselves. But I'll tell you one thing: once you get involved in trying to help, the future for our children, and Popeye knows what it's like and all. Sure, it's hard work, but you have a lot of rewards. Because when you know that's what you're doing, you're not doing something to affect society right this minute necessarily. You're doing it for future generations and for people in the rest of the world as well. Because they are counting on us. And boy, I'll tell you, foreigners are not happy. When they see what we're letting happen here, I'm talking about people, not governments. The governments are pretty bad. I'm talking about the people. They were sort of depending on the United States of America to keep this whole thing from crashing down on top of them, this evil system. Well, it doesn't look good right now, and we've got to really make an effort, not just for our children in the future, but for the rest of the world.
Well said, Charlotte, and I want to give you a big thank you from myself and from everybody out there that's listened to you over the years. I know they're all grateful for a lot of the sacrifice that you've made. We all, anybody that does this stuff research, we all know that we have to sacrifice a certain amount of, personal time and with our family and anything else. And you've been doing this for a very long time, and you've really gone through some stuff, and yet you've stayed strong and you stood your ground and you've stayed true to your word, and your information, your story has never changed. You've never wavered. You've never lied. And you've always been a beacon of hope to a lot of people, and I want to say thank you so much for doing that over the years.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Without people like you, I couldn't even get it out. That's very kind of you. Makes me feel good. I really appreciate that, Popeye, and best to all your listeners, and God bless them and keep them, and we'll just do our best, right? That's all you can do.
Yes, ma'am.
Who knows? We might just be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat.
Oh, I have no doubt. I have no doubt. People ask me if we're going to win, and I always say, yeah. It might look dark, but we'll win. It's always darkest right before the dawn. So.
Well, we're going to go down that rabbit hole, and we're going to capture a rabbit.
And we're going to yank it right out of the hat.
We're going to yank him right out of the hat and let him loose.
Thank you again for coming on, Charlotte. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Popeye, and everybody. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There she goes, ladies and gentlemen, Charlotte Thomson Iserbyt. What an incredible lady, an incredible inspiration to the rest of us she is. So I urge you to go get her book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, over at her website, which you heard her and I discussing. I urge you to go get a subscription to her son's website and download the entire contents of the website. There's documents and books there that the powers that shouldn't be don't want anybody to see. Download them. Get them. Take them. Like I said, you spend $200, you get the full DVD box set, plus you get the book deal that she has with the original book if she's got any left, because they're out of print. It's like the size of a phone book, and she autographs them. You get the abridged new version, and she's also got bumper stickers. I know that as long as she's got some of them, I know she throws one or two bumper stickers in there as well. So you get that, the DVD box set. I mean, it's like a huge pile of information for like $200. The power that gives you as an activist is incredible. You can go out and do screenings with this stuff. You could sit down and educate your family about it, your friends, your neighbors. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight, taking the time to listen and educate yourself. I urge you to download the archive from federaljack.com, or you can download it from Truth Frequency and spread this interview all over the place. This stuff is very real, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't matter if you think it's a conspiracy theory. It's not. It's a conspiracy fact. There are very powerful individuals who are conspiring to take away your rights, your property, and turn you into slaves. We need to stand together and stop it. Thank you all for tuning in. By the way, I want to give myself a shameless plug before I forget. T-shirts are available. federaljack.com/downtherabbithole T-shirts are available. If you want to purchase one small to XXL in size, I have available from small to XXL. Go over to federaljack.com, and right on the side, you'll see the little animated GIF. The T-shirts flash, and you can click there. Up in the header, you'll see an option, one of the tabs that says Store, and a little drop-down menu will pop down, and you'll see the T-shirt button. Click it, and it'll take you to the page. Either way, you can order the shirts over at federaljack.com. Support the radio show, support the website, show me some love, and introduce people all around you to the site and the radio show. And the shirts serve as a conversation starter, so they're interesting to say the least. Anyway, if you want a shirt, go check them out over at federaljack.com. Thank you for the support. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. I love each and every one of you. And as I tell you every night, the solutions to our problems are most definitely an inside job. I'm out.